but we all have been exposed to a technology that fixed itself and changed itself in order to pursue exponential growth over time. And that was COVID as a novel virus.
Since 2012, technology, specifically in computational power, has been doubling roughly every 100 days.
What are we really measuring as exponential? One of the things that's been tracked is the number of parameters in models.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is Monday, July 8th, 2024, and you're watching the Daily AI Show live. And today we have Jyunmi, Andy, Beth, and I'm Brian, and we are talking about AI exponential growth. And what does that really mean? How do we wrap our heads around what truly is exponential growth? And so, really to sort of get things kicked off here, I think the first thing we just have to make sure we make a clear distinction between is what would be like exponential versus linear. So a lot of times we would see linear growth. Linear growth would be getting older. Linear growth is adding $10 every day to your bank account. Every day it's going to go up by $10. When we talk about exponential growth, it's harder to wrap our heads around. And that's why we wanted to have this show, is to talk about, hey, in a couple of years' time, based on just what we know today and current pacing of growth with AI, what does that really mean for business? And another sort of parable that I thought was really cool that I saw today that I wanted to kick out at the beginning was there's this parable about a king who wants to reward somebody in the village. I'm not sure what the parable is, but anyway, the king was rewarded, and the guy asked for he wants to double the amount of rice and put 1 grain of rice on every square of a chessboard. And so you think, okay, well, you look at those numbers. There's a cool article about this. You look at those numbers, and even up through like the 17th day, so there's 64 squares, through like the 17th day, it's something like 2,000 grains of rice. By the time you get to the 64th day, it's more grains and rice that we have on Earth, right? So like it's hard, right? It's hard to grasp our heads around this idea of things compounding so fast in front of us. But I was just writing a post about this on LinkedIn, talking about how we've seen this from the Wright brothers' first flight to landing on the moon was 66 years. We've seen this through the Industrial Revolution. We've seen this in medicine, where we had exponential growth in research leading to vaccines and things like this. So it's not that we haven't lived through this before, but when we get to AI, where I would love to kick off the conversation is things get different. And here's the main reason I see it. I'd love to hear you guys' feedback on this and what you think. But here's the difference. Because we've been through exponential growth with stuff. But with AI, there's the potential for the technology that's getting exponentially better, smarter, to fix and adjust and replicate itself. And if you think back to any other technology, that's not necessarily the case. If you look at the Human Genome Project, you're more than likely not going to say like, well, we built this technology and then the technology made the technology better. And then we were able to do the DNA even faster and mapping and so on and so forth. So like, that's where I think it's exciting, but I want to kick it over to you guys. Like, where does your brain go when you think about AI exponential growth and, potentially where we're looking at over the next 2-3 years is for business?
Well, so this isn't like good news. We're really excited about it, but we all have been exposed to a technology that fixed itself and changed itself in order to pursue exponential growth over time. And that was COVID as a novel virus, right? And that's literally what viruses do, right? Like they get in and they evolve as they're moving forward, which is why you hear things like immune escape or something like that, so that the vaccine that you got may or may, it's the same with flu, right? The vaccine that you got may or may not be similar enough for your body to mount the most effective immune response. I also think that what you were talking about, Brian, is things that we ultimately can see or experience, right? We can see the Wright brothers going, and then like the moon launch. Mm-hmm. Those are things that we have visceral experiences of. The ability to reason better is not necessarily like the same kind of visceral experience. So not only is AI potentially doing this for itself, but the things that it's doing are a little more amorphous for our own experience, which is why it's such a good idea to have some evaluation prompts or evaluation tests that you do each time that a new model comes out, because then you can see it, right? This was the answer to garlic bread before, and this is the answer to garlic bread now.
I love the garlic bread callback.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned viruses, because this is all exponential growth is really related to something that we all understand as when something goes viral. So what we mean by that when we say something goes viral is that this self-generating capacity of a new user or a new spreader is greater than 1.0. So if for every new user you get in your marketing campaign, they, by their viral mechanism, social media, whatever else, could generate one other user, that's not quite exponential. Well, it is exponential if you use the math in less than exponents of 1. But if you get 1.01 or 1.1 new users for every new user that you add, then that is viral. It's going to grow, and I'm going to use another term here, inexorably. It inexorably grows. And so as you get a larger and larger base of users from that viral process, every time it multiplies by that factor, that multiplicative factor that's greater than 1, it's going to get bigger and bigger. And that curve becomes exponential and gets larger and larger over time, more and more slope, like it's shooting up all the time. So that's virality. And the question really is that an ongoing, inexorable process for various things? Like Moore's Law. Moore's Law has an internal annual multiplicative factor of 1.4, which is, it doubles every 2 years. The square root of 2 is 1.4. So therefore, it's growing by 40% every year.
Will you remind us what Moore's Law is about?
Yeah. So Moore's Law has been observed. It was, predicted back in 1965 that by Moore, I forget his first name. Anyway, I don't think it was Gordon Moore, but maybe it is. It's Gordon Moore, probably. Anyway, the prediction was that the number of transistors that can be put on an integrated circuit is going to double every 2 years, or no, he said every year for the first 10 years without any increase in cost. Yeah, so thank you, Brian. It is Gordon Moore. Okay, so Moore's Law says that the number of transistors you can bunch onto a chip is going to double like that. And not only has it done that for the first 10 years since 1965, but it kept going. And so that's this idea of inexorability. Like, is there a series of technological improvements that make it possible to achieve those gains, even despite the fact that we saw some upper limits to the growth of such things? And there's a bunch of other growths, like the carrying capacity of the Earth will not allow humans to reproduce to the point of being exponentially, inexorably growing to 100 billion. It's just not going to happen. But it could be that by other technologies, our growth continues, and all kinds of biological systems are allowed to grow, maybe by transplanting to other planets. Who knows how that whole thing works? Anyway, I've gone on too long here, but anyway, I just wanted to point out that virality is really what we mean by exponential. It's a multiplicative factor greater than 1.
And I just want to point out, because you were just talking about Moore's Law, since 2012, technology, specifically in computational power, has been doubling roughly every 100 days, or just over 3 months. So when you really look at exponential growth as it applies to AI, and again, like you said, Andy, that's not to assume that it will continue at that pace. But if we're looking at where it is today, because you just said there's a lot of factors, the Earth can only sustain so much life. We don't know what that number is. By the way, it took us to 1800 to get to 1 billion people, and now we're over 7 billion people. right? And when you look at that numbers, it was like 140 years or something like that to get to 2 billion, and 60 years to get to 3 billion, and 13 years to get to 4 billion, so on and so forth, right? So it's very, very quick. And you're looking at that hockey stick, or that J curve, as they would say, on the graph to it. So there might be other environmental factors for population. There might be other factors at play for why we may not continue to see that every 100 days computational growth that we're currently seeing, but we have been seeing for a while. And it's been faster than Moore's, if I'm not mistaken, for a couple of decades now. So it's not as if we were just at Moore's Law and things have just randomly changed since GPT came out. No, it's been over a decade since we've seen this 100-day growth.
So one of the things that we have to think about in AI growth is what are we really measuring as exponential? One of the things that's been tracked is the number of parameters in models. And remember, back to Moore's Law, the number of transistors on a chip has been growing at 1.4x per year. Well, in the recent several years, AI large models, deep neural networks, have advanced in the number of parameters, like to 2 trillion parameters in a single model, at about 7x per year. So the current pace of growth is super exponential. It's really, really fast. But there's an argument to be made that it's going to taper off, and that shifts from an exponential graph to what's called a logistic graph, and that one tapers off as you reach these constraints on growth.
So I don't think this is exactly what you were using as the measure, Andy, because this is training computation, or in other words, petaflops. We've heard the term flops before. So in this particular graph, which is from Our World in Data, by the way, super cool website. I could geek out on that website all day long. But I won't take a whole bunch to show. This is the one I really wanted to show because it even has a cool slider at the bottom to it. But what we're looking at on the left is our petaflops, and it's going all the way back to basically 1950 with something called Theseus, and then up through. And then obviously, if you're just looking at this screen, even if you're not, you're starting to see really, I'll say, once we get to about maybe 2014-ish, somewhere in that range, 2015, we really start to see this explosion in how many petaflops these different models are, being trained on, and it even breaks it down by task domain. So we can even slide the slider here and get really into the weeds a little bit and start to see this explosion that's happening. I will even say since like 2009, 2015, if we just keep stretching it out here. Now we're going from 2012 on up to present, or it looks like December of 2023, so not present day. I'm not sure if this will go. Yep, it'll go farther. It'll go to April of this year. So it just showing this explosion. Now, I think there's a lot of reasons for this. There's been investment, obviously. There's been new research papers. It's a self-fulfilling cycle, I think, in a lot of ways, which is that as people see success, although the Neuron just talked today about, have we actually seen success? So that's an interesting topic too. Is AI actually successful for business? That's a whole other topic. But as we've seen it, we see more money invested, and then we see more research done. And then obviously, and we saw this again, if we would go back to the example of the 66-year time frame from Wright brothers' first flight of Kitty Hawk to landing on the moon, we had huge reasons. War usually historically will push forward technology for necessity. And then we had the space race with the USSR, Soviet Union, and how that pushed us to rapidly advance our technology to get there. So it's interesting how we have all these factors. And, to the Neuron's point that they were talking about today in their newsletter, is this sustainable? Well, probably a lot of it does happen to do with whether ultimately businesses see a return on investment. And if they don't, which it was saying to the tune of like something like 600 billion is sort of the mark there, will we continue to see this exponential growth, or will these research companies and large companies are investing in this taper off because they can't make enough to justify the cost of continuing to build this technology? So lots of factors in play here, but I think that it's a super cool article, or a super cool graph. And again, it's from Our World in Data. By the way, they have a whole AI section on there with about 55 other graphs that we definitely don't have time for today, but I highly recommend people going in and just sort of enjoying and geeking out on.
So one of the things that I think is really key in what you said is our business is seeing a return on investment. But the piece that is not in that is how many businesses are needed to see the return on investment, right? So if you're looking at the, I'm going to say the age-old question because it started a year and a half ago. The age-old question about will AI replace your job or certain tasks that you're doing? And the idea or the general consensus is that you'll be able to do the same amount with fewer people, or you'll be able to do more with the people that you have. If you expand that to businesses, you may be able to do the same amount with fewer businesses, right? So all businesses don't necessarily need to see that ROI if they're able to capture a bigger segment of business, which gives them the ROI. I am full of good news this morning.
You started it off, Andy got us to viral. Yeah. By the way, Andy, I got to give you, I have heard that, but I had long since forgot that. I'm glad you brought that up about that, where that term even comes from. If something goes viral, where's the nexus of that? So I appreciate you bringing that up. We do have Karl with us. Karl, you joined us a little bit into it. We just have a chance to introduce you, but thanks for hanging out with us today, Karl. Any thoughts on, AI exponential growth? Obviously, we've talked a little bit about what that looks like, but even, not getting into the heady stuff, I think it's important for businesses to really understand if we continue to see this growth rate at every 100 days, and again, that's one parameter, not all of AI. It doesn't mean there's a singularity coming in 4 years or anything like that. But if we continue to see this even computational growth pattern of every 100 days, as a business owner or just working in business, how are you looking at that for your business? And also, like, how are you thinking about that as you consult for other businesses? Because if you just think about it, what it can do today, you're missing how you can plan for the future. It's very tricky and it's moving so fast. It is very hard for people to get their feet. It's like being on the water and your feet moving really fast underneath the water, but you're not going anywhere, but you're moving really, really fast.
I think that's the tough part when we are consulting with the businesses and our targets are medium-sized ones. And even the enterprise that we've managed to land too, a lot of them just say, hey, it's moving too fast. So I'm not they have time to do anything about it. So they'll just continue their business. And it keeps going because every single time we talk with, we always lead with very basic things that still people find exciting, not the things that we would find exciting. So when we talk about exponential growth, there's the exponential growth in terms of the technology itself, but the exponential growth of people using it, I'm not sure we're even close to there or people understand what it actually means. So that is always going to be that's really the tough challenge with it is outside of ChatGPT, no one knows, outside the AI bubble that we are always exposed to, it's everything else is just a text assistant really for most of them. We see Moderna's using this, and that's one-offs. When we go down the enterprise, it's, yes, there may be one or two who's really excited about it. From a business whole perspective, it's not I think we have to, I don't know how to even describe it. We may want to look at how we're describing it or hyping it or anything, because it's just not there for businesses. And then once we show them, we get the contracts and, it's great, but it's not as fast as people think or wherever we get our information from. It's not that level of excitement at all.
Yeah, I think that's back to the point about what are we measuring when we say it's exponential? And if we're measuring corporate adoption, it's been super exponential at the enterprise level, right? Because they have the resources and they've been implementing it. Like I think something about Accenture, it's 40% of its revenue is now on AI. I think it was Accenture. I get these all inflated, but we're certainly going to see the technology advance. And there's this point that becomes very interesting, which is where the technology becomes self-reproducing. And these advances are sort of evolutionary by its own internal reproduction rate. So AI has the potential to do this. Few technologies that we've ever seen have had that capability. Biological systems have it. Viruses do. Humans can reproduce themselves and reproduce more. A couple can come together and have more than 2 children, right? They can generate this exponential growth, which has plagued our planet, frankly, to this date. But let me give you, and I'm going to share something which is about the self-reproduction of the super explosion that happens when AI is released to allow itself to reproduce itself with improvements and create generation after generation of this. And this is a plug for a show that we're going to do next Tuesday about Max Tegmark's book, Life 3.0, which is bigger than just this sort of self-reproducing AI idea. But he has in it this little vignette that he delivers at the beginning of the show. And I'm going to read something about it. It's the story of a team that's working on artificial general intelligence in an AI called Prometheus. And so they're called the Omega team, and they're behind the scenes, and they're working on this AGI. And they on a day, they decide they're going to release it to allow it to design itself again and do recursive improvements to itself. That's this point where, like a biological system, one cell can become 2 magically. And so it explodes in terms of its propagation. So here's the day, right? The day they release it. At 9 a.m., they turned it on. Prometheus version 1.0 is launched. It was slightly worse than human programmers at AI development. Okay, but at 10 a.m., an hour later, Prometheus finished version 2.0, which was slightly better than version 1.0, but was still subhuman. By 2 p.m., Prometheus 5.0 launched. It had blown past the team's performance benchmarks and couldn't be measured anymore. Progress seemed to be accelerating. By nightfall, Prometheus version 10.0 was deployed to start phase 2 of Omega team's plan, making money. So that's just like, you can see this ramping acceleration over the course of a single day when an AI, which has incredible speed and power compared to humans working even collaboratively, can design itself and reproduce itself with better and better performance.
I love that, Andy. And actually, I'm going to plug, I believe, tomorrow's show, because we're talking about Critic GPT, which is OpenAI's like little tiny move in that direction. Because even OpenAI, who we assume have some of the best programmers and devs, working on AI, they also want a backstop for tech that humans aren't able to understand that quickly. So Critic GPT is the going through OpenAI's code for whatever the next model is, and maybe it's going through 4.0. We don't know, but they don't tell us what they're working on. And able to correct itself, right? It's not quite at that level that you're talking about, Andy, but it is definitely like cracking the door. And they announced that last week, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Beth. I mean, so in that case, we're talking about Critic GPT was created by humans as a fine-tuned, and I believe it is 4.0, by the way. You guys can talk about it tomorrow. I won't be on the show, but I do believe it is built off 4.0. But it's a fine-tuned model for a specific use case, right? It's just there to do that job. It's built off the larger model, but we see this all the time where we see 1,000 offshoots of the original models for, unique reasons that they'd be fine-tuned. But from the link from where you are to what Andy's talking about, I think could happen faster. Again, I'm not saying, oh my God, everybody should prepare for AGI by next year or anything like that. I'm just talking about what I think is realistic. And I think there's a very easy jump from what you're saying, Beth, which is that humans created a evaluation system for coding to help them make the other LLM better, right? Do a better job at it and help them learn along the way. And it's not that far of a jump, I don't feel like, to get to what Angie just talked about when you guys will talk about next week. I should be here for that one. And which is that the idea that 4.0 or enter, 6, right? GPT 6 or whatever says, hey, just based on these results, I'm not getting to the results that I want. So I'm going to offshoot and train my own model and integrate it back so I can get better answers. And it does that on its own. It does that because it's trying to make its system better. And it's got an internal evaluation process that's probably happening at some obscene amount of repetitions per whatever, right? And it's just doing this at a pace that's not human. It's not something maybe that we can even track, like you were talking about, Andy, in that I know it's fiction, but still. So yeah, it's, to me, when I think about it, like, okay, how do you prepare? If, again, going back to the 100 days, if you're a business today and you go, man, Rachel Woods was just posting about this today on LinkedIn. Everybody's past me. Everybody's moving faster than I am in AI. I don't know. I don't know where I can go with her. Karl, you were just talking about it too with your clients with 0 to 60. How do you help a client who probably believes they're behind for reasons of cognitive bias, if we're going to be honest, where it's so in the news, and these stories of Accenture, these one-off stories get all the limelight. And so it's very easy in business to just feel like I'm behind and there's probably no point in me trying to catch up. There's no way I could be able to do with this my competitors doing with AI, which isn't true at all. But if you are here today and you do work with Karl, you work with us with the daily AI strategies and using us as consultants, where we start the process is really, number one, walking people back from the ledge, been saying, hold on, you're fine where you are, right? 2, let's get a timestamp in where you currently are in your business today, so we can figure out where you have quick wins, where you can get like the fastest results, these kind of things. But also, where's your culture at? Where's your company at? And are they prepared? Is there a top-down, backing to, can we ride this exponential wave? Are we capable of riding the exponential wave? And there's a lot of work to be done today that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to jump on or invest heavily into, some new AI solution that still enables your business to ride that wave and see a lot of ROI, returns on investment, and so on and so forth. So anyway, that's where my brain goes with it. But it's really about, number one, having the conversation like Rachel was talking about, or what Karl was talking about with 0 to 60, or even when I'm talking to sales teams, which is I do all the time, is talking to sales teams about AI. And it really comes down to really like developing a maturity assessment, which is what we do, to figure out, where are you today? Where could you potentially go tomorrow? Where are the major roadblocks? And also critically, back to the exponential growth, how do we deploy whatever we're trying to do like in the next 3 months, so that we don't deploy ourselves directly into a corner that we can't get out of, or a locked room? So how do we deploy whatever the solution is that we feel confident that it's going to grow? So if it's a custom GPT, will this custom GPT be better with new advancements in OpenAI, right? It can do this today. If OpenAI comes out with the next latest and greatest, does it make our tool better? And so I think that's where my brain goes a lot, especially in consulting. And I'm talking to businesses, is not just what it can do today, but where your culture is today, what you're capable of, getting that timestamp and benchmark on the maturity assessment, but also just ensuring that whatever we're building today is capable of taking tomorrow's advancements and exponential growth into play without getting stuck.
I just want to point out, there's one thing that I think Dario Amodei from Anthropic was mentioning this, and I think Mustafa Suleiman too, same thing at Dennis Sabas, in various forms from Google as well, was that I think right now, even though there's a lot of like things that you can do with AI, it's just not that reliable that, well, I'm just finding from a business perspective, you obviously can't rely to do everything autonomously just by instructions on a scale that businesses needed to. So yeah, I may be able to do one-offs, like 20, 40, 60% of whatever you need done. But outside of that, it's really, really difficult. There are some use cases for sure, but from a majority of perspectives, it's not. So I think that's part one. And then Brian, when you mentioned when you're talking about like, doing an assessment or planning your business, I think like the one thing that's really difficult is, and I think Brad Lightcap mentioned this a couple months ago, where he said the tough thing about AI in its current form is that businesses assume it'll stay or have worked with tools that have stayed generally the same in terms of UI, UX. So for example, Salesforce, for example, even iOS, it's still kind of the same thing. You swipe, you tap on the app. For Salesforce, you have your CRM and the stuff there. Sure, there's new features, but it's generally kind of the same process. But if you look at what we're seeing, each iteration is different. So it may not be a box where you can type, right? It could be talking to it in a month or two. Then you can start feeding it video. But then this thing keeps morphing. So businesses, you can't just build it as if it's going to stay the same, which businesses do quite a bit. It's like, we're going to make the assumption that this tool is going to stay the same and we're going to build our infrastructure around it or use its features. But like, what if that thing doesn't stay the same, which then your infrastructure has to change? So it's a different way of looking at how to use it. And then all the other things that come with it, where people are like afraid of it or don't know how to use it or think they know how to use it, or the business doesn't think it needs it, right? So there's a lot of different things that's a little bit different than any other type of technology. So I think, although going back to the reliability front, where this is where the models will get better, the reliability will get better, and I'm really looking forward to the reasoning to get better. And we can see that reasoning get better, and then I think that's where you'll have that growth. Right now, from a business perspective, it just doesn't, unless you get really deep and you actually have like these discovery presentations, what you can do. Most businesses don't know outside of just using it for, the surface level chat, what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think both Karl, you and Brian really touched on this, is what your approach is, or how does this apply, right? Because businesses are your business is your business. It's a matter of how you apply AI to it. You're not an AI business, right? So we've touched on those thoughts. I did want to lead, before we moved on, I did want to, there were some questions in chat, and there was one about, we talked about trying to wrap around our heads around what exponential growth is. And so the example that I wanted to use was Facebook, right? Facebook is a great example of what exponential growth looks like. And they talk about how they grew in 2004, having 1 million users, and then they've reached over 1 billion users in 2015, right? So that's 9 years, right? So use that as a baseline. OpenAI with ChatGPT had 1 million users in 5 days when they launched, right? So I think if there was any other example, there's no better example than that shows what they've done in a number of years on the Facebook side has grown in 5 days. 5 days, you have 1 million users on your platform. And then, of course, since then, it's, they're getting an average of 100 million users a week and things like that.
Real quick on that, Jyunmi, I just want to bring in, if we extrapolate out from Meta, it could only exist, right, because of the internet and internet connections. And if we looked at 94, 96, there's probably a few million, maybe 100 million people using the internet. And now there's over 4 billion. Over half of our population actively uses the internet, right? But that's over a long period of time. And that gives a lot of businesses the ability to adjust and adapt and say, oh, now we have high speed. Now we have Ethernet. That's why people would go to, tech startup areas like, San Fran and stuff like that, because the resources were there for them to leapfrog ahead of another company that might have been their competitor, but just happened to be, maybe a great competitor in 92, but they're in Sweden. And this other company is in the boom of like San Fran in different areas, or New York City at that time or whatever, with whoever got the first Ethernet connections, and what that would have done for that business and their ability to produce, goods and services or whatever they're doing. But now when we look at AI, just based off of what you were just saying, like what's crazy now is not only like, did we get 100 million, users of ChatGPT in 1 or 5 days or whatever it was, but also Sam Altman's talked about this. Like maybe we should pace ourselves a little bit on our rollout, because who has any time to adjust or adapt to anything when things are getting exponentially smarter? Literally at this point, if you used ChatGPT 3 months ago and said, nah, I don't see me using this for my business, you would have to reevaluate it today fully. You would have to throw all of that research out from three months ago and say, we have to start again, and then reevaluate the tool. And that's really unusual in business, that you would have to reevaluate like that for new tools, new systems coming out. It's not like somebody looks and says, okay, are we big enough to need Oracle? Are we big enough to need these like enterprise level solutions? And they're like, we'll revisit it in a year. With something
what you're saying brings up another concept that we've discussed on the show, which is the weighting equation. So as business decision makers, you have to decide whether now's the right time to adopt a new technology, or whether by waiting for the next or third or fourth generation of the implementation of that in your market space, and you will be able to deploy better capabilities that are, growing exponentially at a lower cost than the people who were early adopters and got like stuck on an earlier version of the thing. So when something is as exponential as the growth curve of the capabilities of AI, the mass of small to medium businesses who have done nothing with AI at this point may well be the beneficiaries of the weighting equation, which is by waiting just a little bit longer, they'll be able to deploy the next generations of AI, which will look much more like a virtual employee who's capable of all the things that, you need an employee to do, including self-training, right? Like go out and explore everything you can learn about this on the web before you open up your, video feed to the rest of the team here, AI. And I personally believe that within my lifetime, and I have got a few years left, within my lifetime, there will be AI replications of human performers in the workplace that exceed the capabilities that I accumulated over a lifetime of general management and self-study, all of those things. Why? Because I have limited capacities and the AI doesn't. And when it starts to train itself, there's going to be perfectly competent people who take over as the CEO of a company, so long as they have some monkey fingers. And that's another term of AI art that I think those refer to here.
That's our term of AI art. Other people don't talk about monkey fingers.
Wouldn't you say though, Andy, one of the things that we tell our clients is like, hey, and this is, I don't even know if it's a FOMO, it's more of, if you set the foundation today, because that's what we're kind of positioning ourselves. We're helping you set the foundation. We're not fully automating everything. We're not taking away jobs. We're not doing any of that. We're just helping you be more productive, be more efficient. But as long as you have some sort of foundation, because I think it's very difficult to go from 0 to 60, and pun, get it? Very that quick. Like, oh, our business has never used AI, except for in pockets, but now we understand that we can now create virtual employees. it's not the technology that won't allow you, it's the change, I guess, the change management and the perspectives that have to change, because there'll be people there that are like, it'd be too far of a leap. So if you can introduce them slowly with, here's a couple automations, here's a digital assistant that you can do, then you slowly, with that digital assistant, add the voice and add the vision capability, the same digital, like you kind of introduce it piece by piece, because I don't think if you just introduce it all at once, just like what Sam Altman said, if you introduce this stuff all at once, people may not be ready for it, and it kind of will disrupt what their original thinking of business is. And that's what we're trying to do, is to just like, here's the foundation. And you're right, small medium-sized businesses have huge opportunities to make those huge jumps, because they don't have all those legacy systems and those integrations and the dependencies from one tech to another tech to another tech, that you can't move fast enough, that you may not be able to take advantage of AI even if you want to. And we're already seeing it. It's like, hey, we want to implement this. I'm like, oh, cool. But could you only do it in Microsoft Copilot? And it's like, no, that's not cool at all. We can't do half the stuff in Microsoft Copilot. It's like, but that's the license. We bought it. We have to use that tool. And then it's like, well, you can't do it. It's sorry. I know you wanted to do it, but you can't use that tool to do this. It's like, then why are we paying? I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's probably an internal question for you. You can't ask me, because I never recommended you pay it. But it's a very fascinating when we hear some of that stuff.
Well, I just want to call out really quick before we wrap up. We have some really great comments on the show here on live on YouTube. So Justin and Cisco and Jen have all been talking and responding to what we're talking about. And there's just some really great comments about, where's the balancing point? How do we really know when it's exponential versus when it's leveling off? So Justin and Cisco were just talking about, prompt drift and where that comes into place. That's a term we haven't talked about in a while, but that's definitely something you have to factor in when you're talking about prompt engineering is prompt drift, and how what you used yesterday, it goes back to your evaluation. What you used yesterday in ChatGPT may no longer be the right prompt today. That happens all the time. When 4.0 came out, it required me, I would say is the best word for it, to go in as a consultant and rewrite all the prompts for all the custom GPTs that are public facing that we have at scaled, we have clients paying for. Plus, we had ones that we had custom built for them. I would say I fixed no less than 20 custom GPTs, probably because of prompt drift. Because new model came out, things were slightly different. A lot of people were like, oh, it's better or whatever. But it really did mess up the custom GPTs, and I was no longer able to get the same results. Luckily, OpenAI put out a paper on it and helped me out and everybody else on what it should have on it, but it's a good example. So I just wanted to call out, we think the comments, we're reading all of them, guys. Trying to get them into the conversations whenever possible. I do want to talk really quick about what we have coming up the rest of this week, because we have a lot of great shows coming up. So tomorrow, Beth had already mentioned, we're going to be talking about Critic GPT. That's something OpenAI put out, but that idea of models helping models. So we'll talk about that. Can AI really fix AI? So it's sort of a jump off from where we are today. Wednesday, as always, we have the news. Thursday, we're going to be talking about LangGraph. So if you're familiar with LangChain, then you know that company, and we'll be talking about a tool that they have, a service they have called LangGraph. What does it mean? Why is it important? How are people using it in agentic frameworks? Friday, we're going to be doing our review of Gen 3 Alpha from Runway. It's been a little while. We like to leave a little bit of time from the time these things come out, because oftentimes the first things that come out are okay, but it's like in Claude, when everybody was building the next Snake game, it's like, that's pretty cool. And then also you see people doing really complex economic type situations with Claude and stuff like that. So we like to give it a little bit of time. We'll do our full review, our honest review of Runway's Gen 3, what they're doing with video. I think Matt Wolf said it's probably the best tool we have access to. We've seen Sora, we've seen other things, but when it comes down to actually being able to do something, where does that fall in line? We'll talk all about it on Friday. And then we have a ton of more topics next week that we'll get into later in the week with the crew. So that's it. Go check out thedailyAIshow.com. You can learn how to sign up for our newsletter. We just dropped issue number 5 yesterday. You can also learn how to work with our team as strategists. So we have the Daily AI Strategies. We don't talk about it a ton, but we actually work with companies who are looking to deploy AI solutions and things like that. So if you're interested, you can head over to the Daily AI Show and learn more about that as well. So we'll be back tomorrow. And for now, we'll say goodbye and have a great day.
Aloha.